Welcome, everyone. This is a refresher webinar for the Colorado Pika Project's Front Range Returning Volunteers. It's great to have you here with us this year. I want to start by reintroducing or introducing you to the current Colorado Pika Project co-directors. I'm Megan Mueller. I'm conservation biologist with Rocky Mountain Wild. And the other photo on the screen here is Alex Wells. Alex is the community conservation coordinator with Denver Zoo, and Alex and I co-direct the Colorado Pika Project together. The Denver Zoo also has a new Colorado conservation specialist named Julie Krajewski, and she will also be helping out with the project this year, so you may get some emails from Julie. In this webinar, I'll be covering some new things and then talking a little bit about some tricky things that volunteers have asked questions about or have had trouble with. And then I'll be going through a few updates. Remember that if you have questions during the field season or about this webinar, you can always email those questions to staff@pikapartners.org. And those emails still go to me and Alex and Julie to maximize the chances that we can respond to your email quickly during the busy field season. So definitely email us if you have questions about this webinar. I want to start with a critically important reminder, which is that, as you know from last year, pikas may be susceptible to rabbit hemorrhagic disease virus, which has been spreading in Colorado since 2020. It's a disease that's fatal to rabbits. We still don't know for sure that pikas are going to be susceptible to the disease, but researchers think that it's likely that they will because they are such close rabbit relatives. So the other thing that has happened recently is there have been some new observations of dead rabbits in Grand Junction and up on Niwot Ridge. And so it's really important to just emphasize the concern that we have about this disease spreading to pikas. Conducting surveys could introduce the disease into pika populations, and we're especially concerned about this for remote pika populations at sites where our volunteers go where pikas may never see other humans. So please follow the guidelines to prevent the spread of rabbit hemorrhagic disease virus to pikas. You can find those guidelines on the volunteer resources page on the website. You need to disinfect your footwear with a bleach solution, and there are instructions for making that solution in the guidelines. You also need to make sure to wear clean clothes when you go to pika sites and to carry a tarp or a plastic sheet or some kind of clean ground cloth that has also been disinfected that you can lay down on the ground and put your gear, your backpack and other gear on at the site, and that you can also sit on at the site. So just make sure to review those guidelines again this year and follow them carefully. The other thing we want to emphasize is that it's really critically important for you to report dead or sick pikas to us as soon as possible. If you observe a dead or sick pika, take a photo, record the GPS coordinates at the location, and then as soon as you get back into cell phone range, follow the instructions in your volunteer manual to report that sighting to us. We will try to send a team out right away to collect that carcass, and so that we can test it for rabbit hemorrhagic disease virus. So make sure to report those as quickly as you can so that we can get out there before predators remove the carcass or something else happens to it so that we aren't able to find it. All right, so that is rabbit hemorrhagic disease virus. The next thing I want to talk about is that we have made a couple of minor changes to the protocol. On the volunteer resources page on the website, there is a summary of changes to the protocol. So make sure to review that before you go out this year, but I'll go ahead and talk about them here as well. So the first change to the protocol is that we are now asking you to take and submit photos of pika sign that you see at your site. So we'd love for you to submit 1 to 3 photos of pika sign, and it's really important to submit at least 1 if you can. This helps us to confirm the pika signs that you observed, and it's something that outside researchers interested in using our data have asked us to do. So it would be great if you could do that. Please try to get a photo of the best evidence of pika presence at the site. So if pikas are present, it would be ideal if you could submit a photo of either pikas or fresh hay. If you don't see pikas or fresh hay, then submit a photo of scat or old hay. The next change that we've made to the protocol is that we are now asking you to record any sign of rabbits that you see at the site. And we're interested in the presence of rabbits at our sites due to rabbit hemorrhagic disease virus. We want to know if rabbits are nearby because that tells us something about the potential for the disease to spread to pikas. So let us know if you see a rabbit and then look for rabbit scat pellets. Rabbit scat pellets look a lot like very large pika scat pellets. So they're dry, they're woody, and they're light brown in color. The color can vary a little bit, but typically light brown. They're shaped like slightly flattened balls, so they're mostly round, but just a little bit flatter than pika sign. And then they vary from pea size to about ½ a penny. They're much larger than pika scat, but they're much rounder than any other scat that you will see from other species up there. So that's the changes to the protocol. And now I'm going to talk about just a small handful of things that either we have gotten questions from volunteers about regularly or that we think may be things that volunteers have some confusion about. So the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that we would like the pika surveys to be independent. So that means that when you're doing the survey for pika sign, we want you to do that on your own without anyone else helping you spot pikas or spot pika sign. And so we want the survey for pika sign to be done by a single trained pika patroller. If you've got 2 trained pika patrollers who are out together, we ask that you both search independently for pika sign and then fill out completely separate data sheets and don't talk to each other, point out pika sign to each other when you're doing it. That's called a double independent survey, and that type of data is really incredibly valuable to us in our monitoring. So it's great if you can do that. If you are a volunteer who goes out with a friend or family member who's not a trained volunteer, then obviously you can't do that, but you can make sure that you do the pika survey. You do the survey for pika sign alone and don't get help from your partner who's out there with you. You can, talk about other signs that you saw together after the trench survey and then, write anything you didn't see that your partner saw in the notes, but go ahead and do the pika survey independently. The next thing I want to cover is that a lot of volunteers forget to record the start and end times for the pika survey. And that information is really important for us to be able to quantify survey effort in our modeling. So please make sure to remember to do that. The third thing is we get a lot of questions about estimating rock size from volunteers. And I wanted to re-emphasize that the reason that we're recording rock size is so we can compare rock size between sites. And it can vary between talus that's, the size of a football to talus that's the size of vehicles. And when we do modeling, we'll be breaking it up into categories. And so you don't have to be very precise about your measurements of rock size. Just do your best to measure the rock along its longest axis. I also want to note that we get many measurements from many volunteers over the years at the same site, so we can take an average to get a good rock size estimate. So don't be overly concerned about being precise with that. The last thing that we feel like is challenging for us and for professional pika researchers and for volunteers is distinguishing fresh pika scat from old pika scat. And if you remember, we want you to collect fresh scat samples, but we don't want you to collect old scat. And so we wanted to go over how to tell fresh and old scat apart again as a refresher. So the first thing to pay attention to in figuring out whether the scat is fresh or old is whether it is stuck together, glued together in a little stack on a fresh hay pile or a rock. Fresh scat will be stuck together in a stack on a fresh hay pile or on a rock. It won't be scattered about in the dirt or scattered around on the surface of a rock. So make sure that you're looking for little stacks of scat that are stuck together. Think about it as the pika is pooping, and as he poops, the scat all kind of sticks together on top of the rock. And then as it dries out in the wind and the sun, it will get less moist and kind of come unclumped and roll down off of the rock. And so once it's rolled away from that pile, it's older. Fresh scat is also generally greenish and moist, and it should have distinct green color or plant bits inside if you break it open. Old scat is dark gray, brown, or black on both the inside and the outside. It's dry with no greenish color or bits of vegetation inside. And it is typically not in a little stack on a rock or on a fresh hay pile. So you can see the scat in this picture is all kind of laying flat on the rock. It's not in a little stack. So it probably, was excreted up on the right on the edge of the rock where you can see there's some probably fresher scat that's still stuck up there. And then it kind of rolled down into this crevice, and everything that's down in the crevice is old. This picture shows some very fresh scat here on the left. You can see that it's still kind of wet and moist. There's still urine around it, and it's in an obvious little stack all stuck together on top of a rock. So scat on the left is definitely fresh. On the right, you can see scat that's sort of on a rock and it's kind of stuck together, but it's not in a little stack anymore. It's getting kind of dry and gray and brown. And so this scat is probably old. If you broke it open and it was green inside, you could still consider it fresh, but my guess is that it's old. Here in this photo, there's very old scat on the left that's kind of down in the dirt. It's scattered around. If you see scat that's, scattered around in the dirt, it's definitely old. You don't want to collect it. In the picture on the right, you can see a little clump of scat at the front of the rock that's still stuck together. That may be fresh. The scat at the back of the rock is probably rolled down from there and probably isn't fresh. One other thing to note is that if you're at a site where you're not finding any sign of pika, you're not finding hay, you're not finding scat, you're not finding anything, it can be really good to kind of sift through the dirt a little bit in spots that are near urine stations or in places where you would expect to find pikas, and just see if you can't find kind of small, really dried out old scat in those spots. It's really helpful at sites that don't have pika sign to know if they were there in the past, so it can be worth some extra effort to kind of dig around in the duff and see if you can find any old scat. If you do find old scat at one of those sites, definitely take a photo of it. And you can also go ahead and put that in your scat envelope and email us to say you found old scat at a site where there was no other sign, and send that to us. We won't use that for genetic analysis. We'll just use it as evidence that there may have been pikas at that site in the past. Here's another series of photos that kind of demonstrates the difference between fresh and old scat. So on the left, it looks like that's a pretty steep rock, and the scat is all still kind of stuck together in a clump, and it looks kind of brownish. And so that is probably fresh scat. On the right, you can see that the scat was probably initially kind of stuck to the top of that rock, and it's starting to slowly kind of fall down and roll away, and it's getting a little bit gray and less brownish green. And so that is probably old scat. So that covers fresh versus old scat, and that was the last tricky thing that we wanted to go over with you. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about data submission. As a reminder, there are 3 things that you need to do to submit your data, which is really even more important than doing the survey, because if you do the survey and don't submit your data, it's like you didn't do the survey at all. So please submit the data. The first thing you need to do when you're submitting your data is fill out your whole row in the site sign up sheet. So you use that sheet to sign up for a site, but after you visit the site, there's also some information we'd like you to put in that row to let us know that you did actually visit the site and that you have submitted your data. So it helps us kind of track and make sure sites are being visited and data is being submitted. Then you need to go to the survey 123 form, which you should be familiar with from last year, and submit your data, your photos, and a PDF of your data sheet. And then the last thing you need to do is get us your scat sample. You can return that to us at the end of season celebration. You can mail it to Denver Zoo at the address in your volunteer manual, or you can drop it off in new equipment boxes that we have set up in a few different locations, mostly in Rocky Mountain National Park and the White River. But some of them may be convenient for those of you who live near those areas. And there's information on how to access those equipment boxes on the volunteer resources page on our website. You can also pick up new scat kits from those equipment boxes if you run out. And if you happen to have a GPS unit that you're not using or something you want to return to us, you can drop that off in the equipment boxes too. There is a password for data submission. It's the same as last year. It's still submit that data with an exclamation point and capitals at the beginning of each word. And then we also wanted to let you know that we've made a bunch of improvements to the survey 123 form based on your feedback. And so we think some of the things that were difficult about it last year should be a little easier this year. But definitely let us know if you run into problems, and we'll continue to improve that form. Another thing that we wanted to let you know about is that we are working on making it so that you can use the Survey 123 app to actually enter your data while you're at the site. So instead of writing it on a paper data sheet, you just use an app to put it into your phone at the site. We are going to let volunteers decide whether or not they prefer to write it down on paper and then submit it through the Survey 123 form when they're at home, or whether they want to take the Survey 123 app out into the field and submit the data while they're in the field. You know, there are some pros and cons to using the Survey 123 form on your phone. It's more efficient, so you just would enter your data while you're actually doing the survey, and then you don't have to come home and submit the data once you're at home. But there are also some challenges. You need to put the app on your phone when you're at home, and then there's a bigger risk of losing or breaking your phone if you're carrying it around and entering data as you do the survey. So we want people to be aware of that. There can be some glare on phones in the field that makes it hard to type the data while you're out there. And your phone can always die, so you always have to bring a paper data sheet for backup. So we'll let folks decide whether they are interested in using that app in the field. It should be ready in mid-July, and we will post a webinar with instructions on the website when it's ready. We'll also email you to let you know when it's ready. And then I have a few other updates. The volunteer resource pages are now password protected so that only our volunteers can access them. You will receive an email about volunteering this year that has the passwords in it, but the password for the front range is Mount Audubon. Another update is that we are producing some instructional videos to help folks learn how to use Gaia GPS, and also to help guide you through site sign up and data submission if you need assistance with that. And those will be coming out soon. Another update is that we're setting up a community Facebook group to help people coordinate and find partners, and also share photos and share experiences and other things like that. We don't love Facebook, but we think it's probably the best place to do that. If you are not a Facebook user and you need a partner, just continue to email us and let us know, and we'll try to connect you with a partner. I also wanted to update you on the status of the Pika Patrol app that we're working on that will allow volunteers to record pike observations anywhere in Colorado. We are very close to having that app ready to be released. It's currently in the review process in the Google Play and Apple stores, and that takes 2 weeks, and then if they identify any problems with it, we have to solve those. And so in an ideal world, it'll be out in mid-July, but we're fairly confident we'll be able to finally get it out this summer. So keep your eye out for that. We'll let you know when it's out. And then if you are going to visit a site in Rocky Mountain National Park, we have some instructions that you will need for access and a permit that you'll need to bring with you. So email us if you're planning to visit one of the Front Range sites that's in the park, and we'll get you that information. So that's all for this refresher webinar. I wanted to thank you again for volunteering. It's really great to have you back this year. You guys are amazing, and you have collected an incredible amount of data that's really useful over the years, and it will be great to have you out doing that again this summer. So thank you so much for all of your hard work in the past and for coming back to the project this summer. And then just make sure to, again, email us at staff@pikapartners.org if you have any questions about this webinar or the field season or anything else. Have a great time out there this summer with the pikas. Thanks so much.